Welcome to my Only One Outlier podcast show, where I'll be exploring the data science career tips with the industry experts who can share their experience and journey with us. I am your host Nirmal, from a new grad to an early career data scientist, from a data analyst to a data engineer, or anyone who wants to start or transition their career into data science. We will bring you all the do's and don'ts to help you guide in your data career path. On today's episode, I'm thrilled to welcome our guest, a talented leader in the data science and ML space. With over 10 years of experience across different industries, she's a full stack lead data scientist, currently working in a fintech space. And she's known for her building robust ML solutions, but not only building, it's also about pushing the solutions to production, right? Which is very important. And she has mastered that all. I'm glad she is able to join us today. She also advocates for data science learning community, participating in women in data science conferences, and I've seen really good contents on ML ops as well, which is probably the important thing for all the data scientists to know and understand. And we'll cover some in depth today. Please welcome Michelle Conway in our show.
Thank you so much for having me. A lovely introduction. You couldn't have said any more nicer things. It's lovely to be on the show and chat about data science and everything that's happening in this space. I feel like we're doing a transatlantic podcast. I'm in London and you're the West Coast.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yes. And that's the beauty about living in the digital age, right? So I love connecting people across the globe. And thank you for accepting my invitation to join us. It will be very fun conversation. I think it will be nice to let our audience know a little bit about yourself. Who is Michelle Conway, if you have to introduce?
Who is Michelle Conway? A fun-loving and bubbly data scientist who is very passionate about building machine learning models and putting them into production. Is it helpful if I give a bit of context to my journey into data science?
Of course, that was my next question, and you can cover with your intro. So that's a perfect
Amazing.
Yes.
I didn't want to duplicate all the lovely stuff you said, so I doubled.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
For me, my undergrad was in mathematical science. Like, absolutely loved maths in school. Thought it was the bee's knees, like problem solving, puzzles, formulas, calculus, what's not to love, derivatives. And then it was towards the end of my undergrad that I really got into statistics and data analysis, and that was quite fun and really enjoyed it. And then went into work in investment banking as a grad for an IT consulting company. Moved around to different industries like insurance, but everything was very data based and like statistician roles, which I really enjoyed. You know, you got to learn SQL, like work with statistical packages like SAS, SPSS. But I did get a little bit bored after a few years. I just felt like I was like peaking because it was black box statistical packages, and it was like, okay, they're cool, yeah, but you don't really see what's under the hood. So I ended up like looking into like data science masters and found one in London in Birkbeck University. And it was, you could do it part-time while working full-time. So I continued working full-time. I did the masters to upskill in, you know, the Python programming and object-oriented programming and the computer science side of things that I didn't really have in my undergrad. So I was missing quite a lot of gaps and skill sets. So I started doing the masters part-time over 2 years. I'm really glad I did it, but it was 12-hour days. It was quite a lot of commitment, which is important for development, but also it went into a lot of my personal time. My friends and family didn't see much of me for those 2 years. So it was fun for the gains, but do you know what? I absolutely loved it. The course was great, really enjoyed it. And I think halfway through it, I took a job as a data scientist, and like it was just so much fun. And everything I did in that master's 6 years ago, I'm still using to this day. Obviously, I'm adding in more bits and Python packages, but the principles, the understanding, the logic, that hasn't gone away. So I'm really glad I did that master's. I don't know if I could go back and do it again. Hopefully I don't have to do another one, but I wouldn't rule it out in the next 10 years to be something else.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for sharing that, your background on how you ended up adopting the data science as a career path. Like everyone has their own journey, and it's always interesting, kind of fascinates me to understand. Like nobody starts thinking that they're gonna be a data scientist because somehow their interaction with the data or during the process of
like you said, running SQL, and then you started connecting the dots back to the graduate programs you did in math, calculus, and how they all come together is the title that we all define as data scientists. And in most of the cases, it's a good accident to happen, right? Like accident,
Completely.
like way of finding the right job. It's same thing happened to me as well. One thing on that kind of follow up is the fintech. Do you have an interest on the finance sector, or that was also, something happened based on the job you applied and you started loving it? How did that happen?
I think for fintech, like you learn the finance on the job as a technical person. And I feel like anytime you're a data scientist, no matter what industry you go into, you're picking up that subject matter expertise from the industry that you're in. For finance, I would say because it's so intrinsic to like everyone's day-to-day life, day-to-day business, because it's like finance to customers, finance to businesses, you do pick it up because everyone gets exposure to it. Like everyone has a bank account, everyone has like different products on top of it. So you learn to live and breathe it and you do understand it more. And I think for me, I think it's important to realize that you have to be super safe when it comes to finances. So security in fintech needs to be super like locked down and really good. So you start to appreciate that. I've worked in a lot of companies and industries. For me, I think it's the culture and learning environment. If I'm in a really good culture and there's a really good learning environment, I tend to stick around and thrive and want to be there. So that's what I kind of do it on because data's everywhere.
Yes.
It is everywhere. So having a really good working environment is very important.
Yeah, I mean that's a really good point you brought up, because when I talk to mentees, who are in early career, they always ask me, how do you end up in security domain, or was there something that you chose from the beginning? And I think about the same thing too, like enjoy the data once you start working on it, and then once you build a domain, I think you feel a little bit more comfortable, and it's always good to work on the data where you're comfortable with, right? Especially in the data science, because it is a lot involved in feature engineering and that kind of tax. You don't like the data, of course. You're not going to enjoy much.
Hugely. You reminded me actually when you said about if you don't like the data, you won't enjoy it. I remember I worked in insurance and you had to model personal injury claims, and I'm quite squeamish as a person. Like when I watch Grey's Anatomy, my hand is over half the screen. So when I was modeling this data, it was if you have car accident, it's like writing down the personal injury that has occurred, the dysfunction, the pain and suffering. And I'm telling you, that data set was hard to go in and look at the features because they're quite grim features to understand, like how severe an accident was and what the payout should be. So I didn't love that data set. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. It happens. So moving on, I want to cover a little bit about the challenges you have faced when you come across your journey so far, right? You have obviously 10 plus years in data science, and most of the times we see the success, right? So like how the person has achieved everything in their career. But there's always the other side of it is the challenges they have come across. Especially I want to cover this for my podcast section because I want the other folks to understand the second side of like what they see when people are kind of like building or succeeding in the career, and how you overcome is more important because that would be a good message, right? So for the folks listening, so what are some of the challenges, you don't have to pick all, but the major ones that you face and how you overcome during your journey?
Yeah, I feel when you say challenges, I'm like, right, what's the biggest challenges? And I'd say there is two. One is the application process into the job, and then the second is being in the job. So I feel like the application process, like people doing interviews, it's hard. Like it gets wearing, especially when you don't get the job and you've done the interviews, you've done several of them. And I feel like that's very challenging and that's really hard. I do personally enjoy interviews because I feel like they're a really good intellectual conversation and you learn something about the person you're in the room with, whether it's someone interviewing you or you're interviewing someone else. And it's like teasing out the different data science methods and how that can be applied. So I do find them quite fascinating conversations. But when it comes to going through them to get a job, sometimes you mightn't be the right fit or another candidate has a skill that you don't have. So it's quite challenging to go through it. And I do feel like it builds up people's resilience. There is one thing that I found super helpful is like if I ever have an interview and I don't get whether I get the job or not, I'll always ask for feedback. So if I don't get the job, I'd be like, I'd really value feedback. just to see where I fell down, or if there was another candidate that got it that had a skill that I didn't have, I'd love to know what it is so I can go away and develop that. And if I do get the job, I'll also ask for feedback. I'll be like, well, what is it? Why did you hire me? Because I think that's valuable as well, because you get an insight into the hire. Because sometimes candidates don't get the feedback as to why they got the job, and they just start and they're in. So it can be helpful to be like, we saw this strength in your interview, hence why you got it. So that's the first challenge. Feedback from interviews, seek it out, whether you get it or not. And then the second challenge, I would say, is when you're in the job, tech skills are really important, but communication, like communicating effectively with your teammates, having a positive relationship through good communication, who you work with and for, is super important. Even a colleague said to me a while ago, and it's always stuck with me, when it comes to progressing in organizations, especially in the corporate world, it's not a PhD in computer science you're going to need. It's a PhD in psychology, because you have to know how people interact and how you get on with them and learn how to engage. So, like, communication is important as a technical person, hugely. Then when it comes to progressing in the tech space and moving upwards, your interaction with more people and that communication skill, like, it's hugely important. You kind of move from being a pull request to now in-person conversations of how we liaise and work together and that influence. So I would say they're the two biggest challenges I've come across: resilience in interviews, and then when you get the job, the communication needs to be effective and work really well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think greatly answered. The other half, I mean, we sometimes forget about it, right? So once we get the job, right, what next? So that's always important, like you said. How can you maintain the cohesion with the team? Like not only you're delivering, but how do you make sure everyone is in alignment? I think the communication, most of the times we think about the verbal communication, but it's just like so natural, like you said, like the psychology, understanding of each other's, like how they behave, what kind of strength and weakness, identifying that everything comes under the hood of having effective communication within the team, right? So that's very important. So yeah, thanks for covering that. One thing that I also wanted to add would be, like, during the interview, I don't know how the process is in the UK, but in the US, the feedbacks are not given at all. I think because I think the companies want to protect themselves from the law or something. So I think the email we got usually is, sorry for not being the right candidate, or you're not selected. And there's always a fine line saying that we're not able to share the feedbacks. And it always happens a lot, like you said, feedbacks are extremely valuable. In some cases, at least I was able to write back to recruiters saying that, hey, I don't need a full feedback, but can you at least tell me what are the areas that I did well versus not? And they can sometimes, some of them can give a little bit of signs or hints, but most of the times we don't get anything. And that's tough. Yeah.
That's really tough, because I feel like there's some insight, even if the feedback is like there were so many candidates, like the talent was really intense. We had 500 people apply, like only 100 made it through. We only had one job. You kind of feel like, okay, cool. The bar was high. There was a lot of candidates. Some feedback is helpful.
Something is helpful, yes. So I wish we get a little bit better feedbacks. But I do suggest people at least here that invest, especially my mentees who reach out to me that, hey, I didn't make it to the interview stuff. But then I suggest them that, hey, it's always worth a try to reaching out to the interviewers and then try to connect with them that, hey, obviously this position didn't work out, but like I wanted to be in connection and learn about different things, what you do, and possibly like a mentorship opportunity, right? So failed interviews can be converted to some good positive things.
I had no idea it was so different. I thought you'd be have structured feedback and everything would be like laid out, but like, here's your strengths, here's your weaknesses, here's the opportunities for improvement. That's crazy. They should definitely work on that there.
I know, yeah. I don't know what talking that maybe probably at the policy level, like all the companies are doing that, but hopefully that will change some point of time in future.
Okay.
All right, so moving on, I think we like to cover some specialized topics areas. I know you are focused on ML engineering and ML ops. You do not only kind of like write models in the notebooks and push it to production. I also recently make a post actually that kind of went viral where I said notebook ML and production ML is completely different. It's different. It's the same model, same config, same things you use, but I don't like what happened in the production, right? So you cannot just say that, hey, it didn't work because I didn't test it, or you cannot say that, hey, it worked fine in my system. But I just want to cover a little bit about your experience on and how you kind of build up these skills. What are the skills matters in ML engineering space?
Yeah, completely. And I think the way you just said it, like building a model in a notebook and then scaling it into and deploying it into production, two very different things.
Yeah.
Because when you have it in a notebook, normally you'll have like a sample of data and you'll build a beautiful little model that sits in that sample. Cool, amazing, brilliant. It works, you've got good metrics, good precision and recall, or whichever thing you're trying to forecast or predict. Brilliant. But then when it comes to like taking that beautiful notebook model and actually now it's no longer on a sample of data, it's on the whole population of data. And that could be batch data, streaming data. You don't know what you're going to get different days of the week. Stuff could change, your features could like massively underpredict, values could come in like totally different. So that beautiful little model that you've built now is actually out in the wild on this massive streaming data. And it's just not able to function. Like it needs a massive pipeline. Like it needs something where it can like check the data that's coming in. It can create those features on that massive population data. I personally feel like data science is nothing without solid data engineering. Like you need good pipelines, you need good flow, you need all that thought of. And when you build this model out, like you want proper validations and controls in place. So if something's not right with the data, it's going to like crash your pipeline. And like having really good logging throughout all of this, so if something does go wrong, you'll have a really good report to be like, okay, it's gotten to the feature generation, it's created the features, it's able to do the training, but it crashed out when it came to do the final predictions. Like something's not right here. And having those data validations in place is like really important. So it's when you move it from being just a little sample of data to being on the population data and coming out of that notebook where you've had like a nice little model built and putting it into a modular code base, like proper unit tests written. Like you might start to like use object-oriented programming with how you build out that model and then that pipeline and the different components you have in it. So it becomes this code base that could be up to like 10,000 to 40,000 lines of code. It's no longer a couple of hundred lines of code written in a notebook, and it just becomes this big, massive, beautiful thing. I think they're fascinating because I just find when it's out in the wild on population data, like it's a different beast. It's a bit different ball game. Things are like more complex. You can tell I really love what I do.
Yeah.
Which is why it was like a great question. But yeah, it's a total different ball game to go from a notebook to a production setting.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you raise a really good point about data engineering piece. A lot of the times I talk to mentee and, like when they are saying that, hey, they're here to build the model and, like make a business value. Of course, yeah, that is the right statement, but there are going to be supporting statements with that. You're not going to be there building the model, right away. Right? Yeah, I mean, I wish the data scientist title, you might want to think it sounds like a fairy tale, but it's not. Like you have to do some of the data engineering work yourself, because initially in my early career, I also kind of learned it the hard way. I thought like, hey, yeah, like give me some sample data. There should be some data engineers to help me out, right? So it's not always true. Data engineers has already planned their work for the entire semester. They're not going to just deviate from their work plan to help you out. And then they will give you, hey, here's a database, here's the access. You want to set it up. Uh, Try to get some samples and start at least building the proof of concept or the MVP, and then we'll talk. And then then we'll talk, right? So that means I need to do initial data engineering myself, right? How do I set up the connection with those databases? Whatever sample I want to get, 10%, whatever sampling process I want to run, get samples, try to build and then showcase in the notebook or whatever environment I have, and then say that, okay, maybe, like we can do this. Maybe it makes sense. Then only the people will step in. That if once you grab their attention, then only like they'll be like, hey, we'll help you with infrastructure. Maybe this needs a pipeline that we can maintain over the time, because you need data sources that you showcase us that it has a value to build a model. Everyone thinks that they will start building the model right away. That's not true, right? That is a huge thing that I myself learned too. And you kind of highlighted data engineering. Do some data engineering, right? And data engineering not only about writing SQL, but like understand how pipeline works, how you schedule a job, how you monitor those jobs, and a lot of things, right? So it's just uh, in a way it's a very handy skill, right? Just like plumbing. So plumbing your data.
Oh, yeah, I heard that. Data plumber. I haven't heard that in ages. No, it's a hugely valuable skill. Like you need to be able to like do data analysis on that and then orchestrate a massive pipeline to move that data around. I remember I was working on a model and it was in production and I needed to tweak it. So I was playing around with features and created a new structure for it, fine. And then I deployed it into production and the production setting crashed. And I was like, oh God, it's definitely me. I just deployed a new version. And then I realized the feature, I added a new feature in, and I thought the feature was beautiful. It was looking at different combinations of products and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, I thought it was a wonderful feature to put in. And then I realized the feature I put in was only good if 20 products appeared, but actually another 50 products were coming in because new stuff was being created the whole time. So the business created a new product for that pipeline and it appeared. And I was like, oh God, I did not think of stuff happening that was new. And that happens a lot.
Yes.
Like new data will come in, and if you engineer your data too heavily and you only have it fixed for a view for like I did, I only had it fixed for 20 particular products. New stuff was coming, and my model was like, I don't know how to handle this because you programmed me to just look at this bit. It's really important. Like data engineering is a massive value add.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's so many nuances, as you mentioned, right? So when we do in a notebook settings, that things will probably not cross the situation, or this could be edge cases that never showed up, right? So, and there are concepts of drifting, right? So the distribution will drift over time for the data, and just like you mentioned, the context also drift, like things change, like new classes may be added or new product may be added. How do you accommodate that, right? So of course one thing is to handle when you retrain the model if it's only affects the training cycle, but if it's going to affect the inference pipeline as well, then it's going to fail.
Like you were reading my language when I was talking about data analysis and you're talking about data drift and different distributions, like exactly that. The distributions change and no one affects them.
Yeah, we live in a so fast paced world today, like customer behavior, things, like everything change over time. That's definitely, it's not like you build it and you forget about it, right? So as someone told me that, your actual ML journey begins after you put a model in production. Everything before that is just a prereq.
Yeah, 100%. It's like when it's live in production, that's when the fun begins, which is why I like working in production teams because there's never a dull moment.
Also, like one thing I learned the hard way as well is do a lot of loggings. It helps in debugging, right? So I use like, hey, only few lines of loggings would help me define. Until you started debugging, you realize that, oh, I should have something captured here. Every state capture will help a lot tremendously, right? So
I agree.
storage is cheap, compute is expensive. Do as much logging as you can.
If you have a beautiful log file and you've like great statements put in everywhere, and then you just like trigger your pipeline, like you can tell when the thing breaks, like what steps it's gone through if you're really descriptive. And I have to say, there's a really beautiful Python package called Guru, which is really good for logging. It's like instead of having to use the standard Python one, which you can use, but you have to obviously configure it and like write some bits in the background. Like Guru is kind of like out of the box, install it. It's like a little bit like it's a neat way to start your logging. But I do agree, logging is super important. Log everywhere.
Yes. All right. So a little bit of context switch. So the regulation, and when it comes to compliance, governance, obviously it's extremely important for meeting all these requirements to put our model in production, right? So again, putting in production is different ballgame, like you said. So it's not only about technical aspect, but also about this kind of process and governance, right? Without going too much into the detail, like in the fintech, how have you found that process to make sure that you got enough time, enough planning done, that hey, you have a model coming in, what are the things that you have to worry about, because it's kind of heavily regulated industry, right? So in a way, so what has been your experience at a high level, especially in the fintech?
At a high level, I have to say, in the UK, there is excellent regulators. And I have to say, the regulator in the UK is very good when it comes to financial services. Like, They watch everything like a hawk. They have very clear policies and guidelines that they want to see. So when it comes to machine learning, they want things to be very clearly articulated. They want to minimize the risk. Like, they don't want machine learning making decisions on customers in finance without proper controls in place. So like, you need to be able to say what your pipeline is doing, what your data is doing, what validations and controls you have in place, and having that all documented. So if you think about it, if tomorrow the code base that you have for your production model, if someone accidentally deletes that on GitHub, just accidentally, let's say someone accidentally deletes it, the local copies are gone that are cloned, you don't have that code anymore. How would you rebuild that model? Like, it's not a trick question. If someone did accidentally delete it, the documentation the regulator looks for is how would you build the thing from scratch again? So if something happened to it, do you have enough stuff written down that you could actually build this thing again and be a total disaster? Because things do get deleted, which is why like having proper documentation. But I thought it was fascinating. I was like, actually, that's a very clever way of doing it. People might see working in financial services and doing governance and regulation can have a lot of administrative overhead. And yeah, it might do in comparison to other places that are there's no governance and there's no documentation. But I did think it was a fascinating experience. If you delete your code base, could you go back and do it again? And what do you have? The code's gone. Like, obviously everyone would be like, oh, I cloned it, I have it locally, the code is there. But if that's gone too, you have to start from scratch. Where are you going to go? So good documentation, I think, is important, not just in your code base, but like outside of it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a very good point. We do have, especially for the industries like healthcare, fintech, if they want, like we call it the BCDR, the business continuity during disaster recovery. I guess that's what it stands. So just like you said, what happened? What, like, tomorrow data center is crashed? Like, I cannot say everything is in a cloud. That cloud is not in a cloud; it's in the data center, right? So it happens and it's gone, right? So natural disaster can happen, or anything. Kind of scary feeling, but it can happen. Like, whole core thing is gone. How do you kind of replicate it? And one thing that all of the cloud vendors provide, especially for the industry who wants more redundancy, right? So they can have, all right, so if you're worried about hurricanes, don't only put your data in the East Coast, which is hurricane impacted. Put something in the West Coast too, right? If you're worried about earthquake, put something in the East Coast too. They are giving that geographical options, right? Because it could be redundant in a way, but you can minimize, what the minimum things you need if you have to lift up and build everything, right? So yeah, that's very important actually. And a lot of times when I talk to people, they say, like, hey, again, another set of documentation, another set of process. I know it is kind of sometimes mind numbing, and I'm not a huge fan myself, but there's a value behind it, right? So
Huge value, like, and the way you were just describing about the data centers, you need a backup somewhere. So if you're going to use the West Coast data center, have something in the east, like you said, if there's natural disasters. The same is true with machine learning models. It's like, have a backup copy that documents how you can like start and finish it. So important.
yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Yeah. And then I definitely know that the EU regulation versus our regulation here, right? So very rigid and rigorous. So definitely could be hard oftentimes, but then once you build something following all that, so you meet all the checkpoints. That's the most important piece, right? And all right. So moving on, I think we'll just change gear a little bit. So we want to go towards mentorship and learning. This is definitely my favorite topic. Do I've been doing it for years, and a lot of people find it great value, but at the same time, they don't know how to find the right mentor. They don't know how to approach the people for mentorship, or even if they find it, they don't come prepared, or they don't have anything they would like to cover. They're like, hey, I want a mentor, but for what? Do you have enough planning done from your side to find a mentor? So your experience with mentorship, right? I know you, like, either you being a mentor or mentee, both, like, how in general, how you want to cover that.
No, absolutely. I think I might give my experience on I've heard of this mentorship a few years ago, and I was like, what is this that everyone keeps going on about having a mentor? And I remember it was a good couple of years ago, and I went for an internal promotion and I didn't get it. And I was like, okay, that's cool. Got the feedback. And then I ended up going on a program where they give you a mentor. So I got given a mentor as part of a program, which was great because I didn't have to hunt down and think through stuff. And one was put before me, which was amazing. And I think they were 2 grades above me. But I have to say, it opened my eyes massively to like the value of mentorship. And I suddenly realized a mentor is someone that knows things that you don't sometimes and can give you insight into things you can't see yourself and can help you solve problems. It's kind of like, do you know when you have the balcony in the battlefield view, like you're in the battlefield, but then a mentor comes in and they have that balcony view and they can see stuff that you can't see in front of you because you've got so much going on.
Right.
So I learned the value of a mentor very, very quickly. And then I realized it works when someone has something to give. So my mentor used to always be like, we're getting to the point where I've taught you everything I can. And if you need to go further, you'll need someone more senior. And I was like, that was great insight because I realized since then I've had dozens of mentors. I realize everyone serves a specific purpose. And now I've gotten to the point where I actually go and ask people to be my mentor. But I'll have a specific, hey, can you be my mentor? Because I really want to work on these 3 things. It's my communication skills. And I really feel like you would help me because I see how you communicate. And actually it's flawless. And I could do it if I could do with the techniques you use on that. So that's how I approach it for mentors for myself. And then but I also realize there's degrees of separation. It's very important. So we're both like lead data scientists, which is cool, it's great. We're not going to ask the CEO of our companies to be our mentor because maybe a few degrees of separation too far. Like you want to look around and be like, do I want to go into more software engineering? Cool. I might talk to a lead software engineer and see could they be my mentor so I can pivot. It's degrees of freedom. It's quite close, but a little bit far. I'll learn something from it. Or if you're like, actually, do I want to progress into something that's more middle management, head of function? Maybe someone in that role in a different department could give me some tips and tricks. I've actually done that before. I've sat down with someone and was like, oh, you're head of strategy. What the hell is strategy? Can you explain that to me? Because I have no idea what your title even means. As someone that loves coding and programming. But the one thing I found your mentorship doesn't work is, like I said, with the CEO. Like, if you're a school leaver and you're like, oh, I want to be a head of department, it's kind of like walk before you can run. Maybe talk to someone that's like just started corporate, that's in a grad scheme. They might be able to mentor you with applications and stuff when you're going through university or coming out of school or vice versa. And then when you're in the job and you do a grad scheme, I'd be like, okay, cool, now I want to go into a more senior position. Oh, I might look at people and see, are they a few years ahead of me? They could help me into roles that I want to be in the future in the next year or two. So degrees of closeness. You don't want it too far, you don't want it too close. Because if it's too close, you mightn't learn that much. But if it's too far, the gap is too big.
Absolutely. This is a great point. Yeah, thanks for bringing that. I mean, obviously the CEO is extreme example, but I could just, when you were saying, I could just imagine asking Satya for my, do you want to be my mentor? But yeah, so I think you raise a really good point about that, the reach of connection, right? So I think one important thing is your goal. Like, just like you said, you set up your goals. What do you want to achieve? And like, if it is to be on that position in future, right? So you are currently new grad, trying to find the senior folks is okay, right? So if you're new grads and you're trying to connect with principals at that layer, right? So it's a little far out. You may not learn much. They don't have to offer you that much because even for those mentors, it's already been a long time since their journey of being a new grad, right? So they may not recall everything, or it's hard to correlate in a way. That's right. So that's very important, and that's a very good point. So yeah, finding a right mentor, and it doesn't really have to be, like you said, in your own org or very closed connection, because sometimes I feel like I learn more about different subject areas or different topics, right? So like you said, I want to learn about strategy, or maybe I want to learn about something very different team, like whoever is doing, like I'm in security, but I want to completely go outside of security domain to learn something from the mentor, right? So they could be doing the data science, but definitely outside. Just want to see their purview of how things are different outside of this, my own domain. So one thing is, like, we are sometimes blindsided, of course, that balcony view example. was great because they get to see, what are the things you might be missing or where are the improvements can happen, right? So, and that's where I think we need mentors. So thanks. I think it was a very good point. Especially one key takeaway is the degrees of separation, right? You find the right one.
I kept thinking of degrees of freedom in my head, and I'm like, it's not. It's just
I almost said it actually. That's the statistics and data scientist.
We just know our stuff. That's why we're both thinking of the right thing. I was like, no,
I know.
degrees of separation, not freedom.
I know. It's funny. All right. So now something on your personal story, right? So how you blend the life with tech. I think I always cover this section with everyone because we all are busy, moving in a fast pace, and today's uh, tech industry is definitely moving in the lightning speed, right? So there will be commitment, deliverables. Work is there always. I think it's never going to go away. We committed for it, right? So, but now we need to figure out how to balance out, how to avoid the burnouts, right? And how do you do, so basically what Michelle do outside of work to keep the right balance.
Feel I 100% agree. Like the tech world is constantly moving, and you have your day job, but you need to look after yourself outside of that. And like I'm a big fan of wellness and a big believer in it. And um I feel like when you look after yourself, you're 10 times more productive in your job. Like if you're eating right, sleeping right, working out, like it all helps and it all adds up. And I feel like burnout is not fun. I definitely burnt myself out after doing that masters. I ran myself into the wall. I was like, no, no, no. We don't want this. We want like a nice balance. I find like a work-life balance, it's being able to switch off when you're not in work, which I personally find quite hard because I'm constantly thinking of problems. And if I'm stuck in a piece of code, I have it running around in my head, which is good because you're solving it and you get through it. But you do need the downtime. So for me, like I said, I'm big into fitness, so quite love. I'm a gym junkie. I do enjoy it, like my yoga, strength training, and I actually do Brazilian jiu-jitsu. So it's a martial art that is very technical, so I'm learning a lot. But I find because you have to really pay attention, you stop thinking about code and programming and what's going on in the office. You have to focus in front of you. So for me, I find that really good for context switching, just to switch off and focus in the moment. Like I know it's combat sport and it's not for everyone, and but for me it works. Like some people really enjoy running, cycling. It's the same. That physical exercise does get you to switch off and release endorphins and like gets rid of all the stress bits, and it's just really good for a balance. So for me, I really focus on the wellness and fitness side of things, and that does help give a balance. Like don't get me wrong, I don't get it perfectly balanced every week, but most weeks I will. And when I don't, I know I'll reset myself. Like especially when there's conferences going on, you're traveling for work. It's not as simple as being able to walk away at 5 o'clock and just turn off your laptop all the time. But being able to just check in and be like, how am I doing? Am I totally switched on all the time? I'm learning to switch off. For me, it's balance. What do you do to switch off?
It's a very good question. I think one of the common things I hear about from everyone I have invited so far is working out. Like it's definitely a good distraction, like you said, or in a good one, in a good way, because you're kind of like devoting time for yourself and your body. What I do mostly is these days, I think it's for me, playing with the kids has been a very good, blessing. And I cannot even like you said, sometimes it's hard to completely switch off. Like I mean, switching off physically, not being in the laptop is one thing. But then you're saying like we sometimes these things comes in our mind, right? So like, okay, what could I do there to make it work or something? It's kind of like sometimes keep bugging us. When I'm with the kids, they don't allow me to do anything besides playing with them. So I think these days that has been my, definitely really good distraction to isolate myself, switching off from the work completely, not only physically but mentally as well, switching it off. So yeah, take them out, probably play areas, and I myself take some time to work out for myself also. Definitely works, yeah. And but you brought up a really good point about doing something technical that you have to focus a lot, and you there is no distraction allowed, so you may not be able to bring anything.
Dedicating is very technical, and you have to focus, and it's life or death if you get it wrong.
Yes.
So it makes you switch off, which is good.
It forces you, right? So that's good. But yeah, I think mostly, and then one of few things I learned, like these days, I have my great grandfather-in-law, my wife's grandfather. He's living with us for the last 5 months. He's going back to Nepal next week, and he's 93. And then and his longevity, right? So I when I talk to him, like no major health issues, surprisingly, nothing. Yeah, and then he never did big workouts either. So he always say that, but he was big into yoga since his young age, right? So in yoga, so at least he was doing something and eating right. I think it's all about, he says, the mental and emotional strength is what you first focus on, and then physical strength kind of builds around it in a way, right? So yeah, I think we all.
He's 93 and does he still practice yoga?
Yeah, he does. He's still.
Amazing. Okay, I want to be 93 and still doing yoga. Probably jiu-jitsu, but definitely doing yoga.
Yeah,
Great.
it's very, very motivating to see him, and especially the one thing I find it is like over here, especially in the US, we always in a hustle mode, like hyper production mode and things like that, and sometimes we forget to take care of ourselves. It has happened. It has happened to me as well. Like you mentioned, like burnouts are not fun, right? The saddest part is you don't realize sometimes when it's too late, right? You think that you're doing okay, and then the work has gotten you so badly that it's already affecting your daily life in a way. So, and I look at his advices thinking that, yeah, of course, right? Like many things where things can wait. I mean, sometimes I used to think that, hey, it has to be done today at this moment, right? You prioritize things, of course. You're not gonna let your team hanging or your work items, falling beyond the deliverables. But if you try to prioritize it, there's definitely ways to give yourself some time as well, and that's important, I guess, in my opinion. So we all need.
I definitely do that where I'm like, I have a to-do list and I'm like, I've done the majority of it, and there's always a few bits and I'm like, is the world going to end if I don't sell this email right now, or will it be okay if it goes in the morning? Probably. Pros and cons. I may will get my P45 if I don't send this email right now. I'm like, if I say yes, then I'll be sending it. If it's a no, it can wait.
Yes, of course, as long as I'm not sending an email that, hey, the tariff is effective now versus tomorrow, affecting the economy, right?
Economics is very important. We saw it with COVID, and we're now seeing it again with tariff.
That's just a fun thing. But yeah, so we are probably coming to close to an end, and such a good conversation so far. I think I just want to end in a note that your personal story, that anything that you have, if you can link up with the data science, right? Like it has a significant impact on your career. Sometimes there are, right? Because you don't realize how does this connect. But if there's something to share with the audience, I would love to hear.
In terms of, I think the thing for me is role models. Like having role models is like really important. And I am a big fan of women in data. They do a lot of events bringing people together in different levels, like all women working all different flavors in data. Models is hugely important because you get to see people in positions that you're like, oh, that could be me. I could do that. And I think for me personally, like I've been really blessed because I've had two role models, like, well, no, loads of role models, but two in particular, which are my sisters. So I have two sisters who work in STEM. One's in pharmaceuticals, one's in medicine, and they've always been role models growing up because they've loved maths and science, and that's just been the norm in my household. So I just naturally had role models I'm super grateful for, because it wasn't until I started to go to like, university in the real world and, see different industries and different jobs and careers. I was like, oh wow, I was blessed. I had really good role models growing up. So for me, I think it's, yeah, everyone has their role models that inspire and motivate them. And I have been very blessed to have two really good sisters.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, definitely. It's very good to have that character. Like you get inspired looking at them growing up, and always chase that personality, or at least to build something on you inspired by that is great, right? So uh all right, so I think all my conversations usually go so nicely, and I don't want to end
It's been a lovely conversation.
I enjoyed really, really much, so far. Now, any advice at the end, right? So maybe it could be any tips or anything you have, if I happen to say what you have for the listeners, right? The last bit of takeaways or advices.
I would say don't be afraid to fail because it's not failing, it's the first attempt in learning. So don't be afraid to fail. I've definitely failed loads of times, but I've learned so much more from my mistakes. If you get it right first time, like what you really learn, you just pass go. But learn from your years.
Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing. We fail it, call it a version zero, right? It's okay. Keep moving.
Yeah.
So we don't learn without failing. That's absolutely rightly said. So the other thing about this is like when people share, when I talk to mentees, right? So they always see, hey, like people changing the job, or hey, I just landed a role, so all this celebration post coming in. And then I tell them that, people don't share the failures. Like they don't share that someone failed the interviews, right? I encourage people to do it because even if you fail, and these days I sometimes see the post from the people like, hey, I have a great experience interviewing for Meta. It didn't work out, but this was my experience. And that experience, when they share, it may help the other person who is going through the process or facing that interview, and it also helps them to understand that, hey, failure is also a part of life, right? So, but yeah, I tell them that social media and everywhere where you see a lot of these success stories, there
Yeah.
are a lot of failures behind that. You just have to assume, right? So, and that the failures behind that actually is a huge person. It's the majority class. If you think about the class imbalance from the data science world, yes, the success is just a little piece, right? All right, awesome, Michelle. I really enjoyed our conversation. Again, thank you so much for coming to the show, and then definitely we'll keep in touch. I love communicating with you offline and learning from each other. So all the best wishes for your journey ahead. But yeah, thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me. It's been a wonderful conversation. I've really enjoyed it and we will definitely keep in touch. It's a great show and I was more than happy to be on it and support. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.